With that, let's get started. We are extremely lucky and excited to launch the Founder Fundamental series with Eric Go's workshop on how to get and validate startup ideas. A very befitting workshop to kick off the series with. Eric is the co-founder and CEO of Hopin Technologies and is deeply involved within the startup ecosystem, providing mentorship and advisory at various incubators and accelerators across Canada. Eric's previous experiences are in the public sector, having worked at the Legislative Assembly of Ontario in public relations with the Ministry of Attorney General. Eric, thank you so much for being here today on a Tuesday evening and sharing your knowledge with our group of founders. And I invite you to please begin the session.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming and listening to me talk. It's always very interesting to see how many people actually come and want to hear my story and want to hear the advice that I have from the mistakes that I made. I'm going to share my screen in a second, but I just want to start by saying a lot of the sessions that I do are really just about the mistakes that I've made. Um, the lessons that I've learned from having my startup. This is the second startup that I've worked on. And so I'm really just going to share that with you, share a lot of anecdotes, and I like the free flowing conversation. So if at any point you want to ask a question or something, just stop me. I'll stop at certain points to ask if anybody has questions as well. But just raise your hand or something, or just kind of call out my name if I don't see you. So today we're talking about how to get and validate startup ideas, how to go from that light bulb idea that you have through all the mess, eventually to having your own startup. Right. And that could mean so many different things for so many people, right? And we won't get into it today, but that could mean bootstrapping your startup. It could mean getting venture capital funding, right? Different ways to run and operate your startup and to grow it to, a number of different exit opportunities. I'm going to start a bit about me. This is mostly just because I'm going to go back to a lot of stories. So I want you to be familiar with some of the things that I've done. I have a lot of different hobbies. I've tried so many different things in my life, and that's part of my startup journey that I'll talk about. Um, I grew up playing a lot of sports, football. I played rugby in Trinidad, actually. I lived there for a couple of years and played after high school. I was an amateur boxer before COVID. I love music. I'm a Royal Conservatory violinist. I played in a punk rock band, bass and guitar a little bit when I was 21. I dropped out of school to do that for a year. And then eventually I ended up getting my degree at Toronto Metropolitan University, which used to be Ryerson. Studied business law, worked in the government for about 7 years, 7 years while I was doing all of that, anything from public relations to public policy. And then I realized that policy wasn't going to be the way that I changed the world. And I turned the corner, walked down the street, and found the DMZ incubator. I joined the first startup that would have me there. We ended up growing that one to, I think we were like 1.2 million in profit every year. We had like 30 employees. It was going great. And I couldn't do it anymore because it wasn't my passion. And that's part of what I'll talk about as well. But I went on to found Hopin with my best friend from high school. We went through a number of different accelerators and incubators. Y Space was always our home, and it actually still is today because they haven't kicked us out yet. And I went through other programs. Some of you might be familiar with, if you're familiar with the startup space, Next 36 in Canada, and then Techstars we actually did in Alabama, where we have our US headquarters now. I'm also a consultant with Global Startups, where we help people or startups from overseas come across to Canada and develop their products and solutions here. Enough about me. Um, when you're thinking about a startup idea, I always kind of start with why and start with your why. And what I mean by that is, what's your purpose? What's your cause? And what do you believe in? This has nothing to do with the startup itself yet, but really, I think what we need to ask ourselves is at our core, and for us as people, like, what do we believe in, right? What is our personal mission? For me, my personal mission has always been to be able to improve the quality of life, give opportunities for people to improve their own quality of life for underserved populations. Right. I come from an immigrant family. My co-founder comes from an immigrant family. They worked so hard to be able to give us everything that they have. And I want to give everybody the opportunity to have that life as well. And so I thought I would make that change through public policy. And then I realized it would be 40 years before I did anything. And then someone would come along 4 years later and bulldoze it. And so that's why I got into startups, but my mission has always stayed the same, right? And so when I first got into startups, I worked in a fintech company. We were helping e-commerce shop owners to process payments for people that couldn't qualify for credit cards at the time, right? And this was kind of right before virtual Visa debit came out. And so giving people the opportunity to access online shopping or having the shop owners be able to reach a wider customer segment. And so for me, it loosely tied to my personal mission, but as we grew, it just didn't really vibe with me anymore, I'll say. And so I had to leave and I had to do something else that was more meaningful to me. And I was with that startup for about 4 years. My point here is that you're not going to stay with your startup for the length of its life cycle if you're not passionate about it and you're not embedded into it, right? It's like working a job. I mean, you might be able to stay there, but you're not going to be happy, right? And at that point, you might as well have a regular job and not go through all the heartache of being a founder and all the sleepless nights and everything. So I just want to stress that there should be, a relative degree of passion when you're looking at your startup ideas. So then we have an idea, right? And where do we get ideas? Really, anything in your life can inspire your idea, right? It could be past work experience. It could be observing the world around you, just walking around, maybe on your travels, if a lot of you have traveled through the world, and then personal life experiences. I went through Next 36, which is an accelerator. One of the founders raised a statue. He sold a storage company that he built with Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank. He sold it for $110 million. He was literally driving home from the airport in Toronto and he saw storage units, like one-story storage units all along the highway. And he said, well, why can't they be multi-story storage units? And he literally built that business. He just built multi-story storage units, built a couple apps to manage it, and sold that business for $110 million just because he observed that driving back from the airport to go home. So, keep your eyes peeled as you're going through your day-to-day lives, right? Really look at what's out there, what problems need to be solved. For myself with Hopin, the thing that we noticed was that traffic was getting worse, and I think everywhere around the world, traffic is getting worse every single day. It's not just a Toronto problem, but we noticed that traffic was getting worse. We noticed that people couldn't access jobs because it was too far, right? And a lot of companies were starting to move out of the cities, especially like manufacturers, retail distribution facilities, and things. And we noticed that they were having problems recruiting employees, retaining employees because there wasn't even any transit out there. So every which way you looked, commuting was difficult. And what that came down to for us was that people weren't able to have the jobs that they wanted because of transportation. And it seemed like the stupidest reason not to have the job that you want, not to have the job that pays you a better salary, right? So that you can afford more and give your family more opportunities. So we embarked on this mission to do that. And that's what I had observed. And that's why we started Hopin. So then we're going to move on to ideation and validation. I teach these together because I think they have to go hand in hand, and it's a bit of a like a back and forth cycle between them. Some of you might be familiar with these terms already if you've gone through some startup courses already. Um, Actually, it was Nafis from MySpace when he was at a different incubator who taught me this course as well. So what we want to do is make sure that we identify a real problem, right? So you've identified that you have the problem or you've seen the problem. You know how you would want to solve it, right? Everything's great in your head and it makes sense. It might even make sense to your friends and family, right? And you've talked to them, you've kind of done your own little surveying in your circle. It sounds good. But to be quite honest with you, it really means nothing until you know if the rest of the world has your problem, right? Because you're not just going to build a business off of your friends and family. And that's the harsh reality that I think it seems obvious and everyone's probably thinking, well, duh. But it's something that I think a lot of founders kind of trip up on in the beginning, right? Is that they think the validation coming from their friends and family is going to get them to the finish line, right? So I just want to stress that it's not, and that we need to be able to talk to people outside of our comfort zone. And this is kind of step one to becoming a founder as well, right? Getting outside of your comfort zone because you're going to have to do that every single day. So what do? We validate it. We create a survey. We go out and survey people, whether that's over the internet or in person. We take back the feedback, make adjustments, and then we survey again, right? We do this until we feel comfortable with the answers that we've gotten, until we understand that people have our problem and they like the way that we are solving it, right? And lastly, that they would pay money for it. Um, quick story here. So we did surveying all over. We were on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. Um, we were giving out gift cards to do that. We actually went to I think there were like 6 malls in the Greater Toronto area that we went to and surveyed in person, and we actually got banned from all 6 malls for surveying too much there. So we weren't allowed at a single shopping center in the Toronto area for about 6 months. I'm not saying go that extreme. Probably if you get the warning once, just leave. But we were determined to get 1,000 surveys done, which we did. A couple of rules and tools for surveying as well. And luckily, one of our co-founders who's not with us in the company anymore, he was a data scientist, so he kind of helped us with this and formulating our process. But a couple of quick tips here. So I would go 5 questions max in your survey, right? You don't want somebody sitting there for 5, 10 minutes even answering this. You want them to be done in a couple of minutes if possible, right? You might even have to hold their hands a bit if you're doing it in person and ask them questions one by one and write down the answers yourselves. So get a clipboard or an iPad or a tablet or something. Try to avoid open-ended questions, right? You actually don't want to leave too much liberty to the people that are answering your questions. You're going to get some weird answers. You're going to get some non-answers, and it's just not going to be conducive to what you're trying to accomplish with your survey, right? You're not going to be able to collect the proper data points that you want. You should aim for at least 100 surveys to be completed on your initial surveys in this phase. Again, we had the goal of 1,000, which we got to. Looking back on it, we spent way too much time on that. We could have gotten to like 200 or 250 and been satisfied with that. So some of the mistakes that we learned from that were there is such a thing as over surveying in the beginning, right? So get your 100, get your 200, go back and make adjustments, come back out and get another 200 or so, right? Go back to the same people if you can as well. Actual tips for surveying. So avoid bias where possible. Don't necessarily count on friends and family, right? You want to talk to strangers. Even if it's a friend of a friend or your cousin's friend or something, right? That's not necessarily the most reliable person to be talking to. Ask that being said, ask your network for help circulating your surveys, right? So we had a bunch of people sharing and reposting on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and everything, right? Getting our surveys out there. And we use social media. So we were on all the different platforms sending out our surveys. We gave it a start and end date for when we were collecting, but get it out there everywhere you can because you want to make sure that you're reaching as many people as possible. In person, again, I think is the best way to do this. It allows you to connect with people a bit more, allows you to have like a conversation with them as well while you're surveying. I think that knowledge is definitely the most important thing that you can get. And then I would offer a raffle or a gift card or something. Not to be crude, but don't cheap out here. I know that we don't all have a ton of money. I was 24 when we started the company and we had pretty much nothing, but we bought one $100 gift card to Tim Hortons, and we used that as a raffle. So rather than giving everybody like a $10 gift card, we just had one big raffle for a bit of a bigger price. So there are kind of ways around it as well. But my point is, you need to motivate people. Nobody's going to care about taking your survey. Nobody's going to answer it honestly if they don't feel motivated to do that. So unfortunately, we have to offer something here, and it has to be rather substantial. So at least $100 gift card to Amazon or something like that, right? And just make it a raffle so that you don't have to buy 100 of them. I'll stop here. Any questions so far?
Eric, there's a question in the chat. How do we
Sure.
survey in public, like at malls, for instance?
So again, tablet or iPad, and you just go up to people and ask them, we're doing a quick survey about XYZ, right? So for us, we said, hi, we're doing a quick survey about commuting. I I just said it was like a research project for school. You can even just say that or something like that because it kind of disarms them. If you go up there and say, hey, I'm trying to start a company and I'm doing surveying, they're probably not going to stop and answer your questions. So literally just doing that and kind of posing it as like a research project as opposed to you selling them something, right? That disarms them a little bit more. Oh, last tip that I didn't write down here, collect emails if you can. And I'll get back to why that's important later on, but collect emails in your survey.
There's another question. Is there a
Yep.
program you could download to track the survey answers?
Yeah, the best free one is Google Surveys. Everybody who has Gmail has access to a drive for free. The storage might not be there, but you don't need that much anyways. Just create your survey there, and then you can have input going through there. It populates it in Google. You can export a CSV file as well. It's, in my opinion, the best way to do it for free in the beginning. Awesome. I'll try to have the chat open. Sorry.
Oh, a couple of other questions.
Um, okay, so we have how much of a problem does your idea need to be based in? Problem, or can it be something people just want or enjoy? The issue with something that people just want or enjoy is that you're going to run into sales hurdles. Um, like every single startup mentor I've ever had has said it has to be a necessity, not a nice to have. So, you could get to a certain point with your sales and it's cool. You could stumble upon the next fidget spinner, right? Where it definitely wasn't something that anyone needed, but something that we all bought. Um, the odds of you kind of stumbling into that are pretty low, and that's why we want to make sure that it's something that they need in the beginning. Other products that you can spin off of that main one could be like nice things that people want, but you just want to make sure that you're not creating a blockade too early on for yourself. Would you hire survey participants through services like Mechanical Turk or Qualtrics? If you have the money, sure. But if you're starting this and you really want to kind of bootstrap, you really want to limit where you're spending your money, right? So it all kind of depends on your risk appetite, I'd say. Right. Again, I was 24 when we started. I didn't have a ton of money. So we went out and just did the surveying ourselves. I have three brothers, so I made them all go and do it with me too. When collecting the emails, how can we do this while disarming them? You need their email for the raffle. That's the easy thing. So you have to collect their email in order for them to win the raffle. If you don't want, and that's why it has to be a substantial raffle prize, right? So if you don't want $200 to Amazon or $100 to Amazon, then I guess you're not giving your email. But chances are you're going to get them from people.
Cool. And I saw Tony raise his hand, so I'm not too sure if you have a question, Tony.
It was a very I kind of answered it myself, but like I know for surveys you want your data to be like relevant. So, your question about commuting, it's kind of relevant to anyone, but depending on the startup, are you looking to survey people that like are experiencing your problem because that might give some bias there, or people that, may not have experienced the problem in the past and you're trying to just see like what would an outsider think?
Yeah, so if it's a very specific issue and you're solving, something for a certain industry, let's say, yeah, you need to find people that are in that industry. Um, there are some free tools for you to not mine, scrape their contact information. One of my favorite free ones is hunter.io. I'll put in the chat here. It's an extension on Chrome that you can put in, and like if you open a website and you open the Hunter extension, it actually shows some of the emails. It's not the most accurate, it's not the best, but it does do the job. Another one that you could pay for, actually, I think they have a premium version, is apollo.io. I think that's how you spell it, sorry. But these sites will kind of help you get access to the people that you need to get access to. Um, Most times people are not going to ask you, where did you get my contact info? If they do, you can kind of just slough it off. It's not a huge deal. Um, it's out in the public. That's why we're able to scrape it. So it's not like they can claim anything against you there. And in that respect, somebody asked about privacy policies when we collect emails as well. Yeah, you should have something, but it's not, again, like we're kind of like we're a scrappy little startup right now, right? So keep that mentality. It could just be like a one-liner on your survey saying, we don't distribute emails to third parties or something, right? We're not going to use it for XYZ. It's only going to be used for raffles and to contact you in the future about opportunities with us or something like that, right? That's it. Um, the other thing you can do, sorry, Tony, just to go back to you really quickly, the other thing that you can do if it's industry specific is if you have a little bit of extra money to do this, go to conferences, right? Either way, as a startup founder, you're going to want to start to go to conferences and different events. A lot of them are free, so try to attend, but like, let's say you're selling something and it has to be to like food processing factories, right? You're going to want to go to these food processing or manufacturing conferences. You're going to want to get in touch with municipal boards of trade, chambers of commerce, et cetera, that are hosting these events, right? And normally, again, they have some free events every year that you can go to. Okay. So now we have an idea, right? Everything's great. People have our problem. People like our solution. They would pay for it. So life is good, and we've kind of gotten over this first hurdle. But what's next? What's next is this absolute jumble of questions and ideas that you have, right? Because now you've validated and everyone wants you to solve this problem for them, but you need to start thinking about what it means to actually start your startup now, right? So we're asking ourselves, like, who are the customers going to be? How do we sell this? Do we need insurance? What kind of insurance? What is the product even going to look like when we build it? Do I have to open a bank account for this? All these random questions that you're going to have popping into your head if none of you have ever started a business before. Some of you might have already, so you might have half these answers already, which is great. But there's going to be a lot going through your mind. And I did it this way because my co-founder and I quite literally had sticky notes going from the basement of my parents' house all the way up the stairs into the living room. And we kept it there for like 6 months until my mom made us take it down. But we were organizing our thoughts. Like we just wrote down every single thing we could think of, put it on sticky notes, and just kind of like organized it into categories, right? So like legal, finance and accounting, marketing, operations, sales, et cetera, et cetera. So I would encourage you to do that as well. Do your own version of sticky notes and kind of just put down any idea that you have or any question you have about what you might need to start a business. The better way to actually organize this, though, so the first step is the lean canvas. Is anyone actually familiar with this? Are we all kind of no? Okay, so if it's new to you, that's great. Because this is like this to me is the first tangible step to starting your startup. And this is something that's used across the board in the startup industry. There is a time and place for you to write a full business plan, right? The 30, 40 page business plan, but it's not now, right? Don't waste your time on things that you don't need to waste time on at this moment. Being a startup founder, you're going to learn a lot about time management, prioritization, finding the most efficient way to do something. And this is the most efficient way to write your business plan without actually writing your business plan yet. There's gonna be a time and place for it, but it's just not today. Fit your answers into these squares. It's going to be bigger than this. I downsized it a bit for the slide, but you should be able to fit your answers into the squares, meaning your answers should be no more than like 2 or 3 sentences for each of these things, right? Follow the order that it goes in as well. There are different orders that people put it in, but I like this one the best because you always start with the problem. And then lastly, you can keep a separate document with long form answers, right? Because again, you're going to eventually write a business plan of some sort. You're going to need a little bit of elaboration on these answers. So just keep diligent notes on it. But this is what you're going to show people in the beginning. So we'll just go through really quickly each category. So problem, top 3 problems. You might not even have 3 problems, so just list one if you have it. But try to keep it to 3. If you're doing 5 or 6 or 7 problems, you're doing too much. You're solving too many problems at this point, and your startup is going to be all over the place. Customer segments, right? Who are we selling this to? So who has the problem? But more importantly, who has the problem that also has the buying potential for this? You don't want to list somebody down there that isn't going to pay for your service, right? Isn't going to be able to afford it or just doesn't want to spend the money on it. Because then you just have a fan, you don't have a customer. Um, Third, we have unique value proposition, right? So you know your solution already. We validated the solution to people. What's unique about it, right? What sets you apart a little bit and why are you different and worth buying, right? Why are you different from your competition? Which is kind of the same as the unfair advantage, but I'll get into that in a second. Your fourth is your solution. Again, top 3 features, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be the product yet because you might not know what it is, but you want to list at least what are the top 3 benefits of the product that I'm building or the service that I'm building. So for us, again, we're solving that issue about commuting, the fact that there isn't transit going out to certain areas to help manufacturers and retail distribution companies, hospitals. So we run a bus service basically. We partner up with shuttle buses, school buses, taxis, Ubers, and we built a logistics software in the back end that powers all this and kind of it does the logistics for mass volume transportation on a daily basis. So that's great. That's our solution. But if I were listing it out here, the 3 things I would want to say are improve employee retention, improve or expand employee recruitment reach, and then reduce carbon emissions, right? Sustainability. So those would be my 3 features that I want in the beginning. This will change as you grow, as you build your service or product, but right now you just want to know how are you having an impact on the world. Number five is your unfair advantage. It's different from your unique value proposition. Your unique value proposition is more geared towards sales, right? So again, why are you different? Why is somebody going to buy you? But your unfair advantage is how you create a defensibility moat around your startup. And so you don't have to have this answer today. It doesn't have to be fully flushed out. But let's say it's something like a proprietary software that you're building, right? An algorithm or something that you're going to patent eventually, right? It's a business model or something that you're going to patent. Patent is the favorite word of venture capital firms when it comes to defensibility and your unfair advantage or your competitive advantage. If you can build something that's patentable or has a trademark or anything, they're going to jump all over it because it has a monetary value on it now, right? There are other ways of doing this. Your unfair advantage right now could also be like a first mover's advantage. No one's doing this in the industry. It could be the fact that you also get to move faster than a large company because you're a startup. Like I talked to one of the car rental companies about what we were doing a couple of years ago, and they told me we're building something similar to you, but it's going to take us 5 years to get like a minimum viable product out. Where for us it takes a year maybe less, right? So there's a lot of these different advantages that you can have now, but what you need to be thinking is how defensible is it, right? As soon as that large company crosses over and they cross my moat, are they going to just demolish me, right? So what is truly defensible about your startup? Six is revenue streams. So, you want to try to figure out how much you can charge for this. And that is a difficult thing to do, especially in the early days. To be honest with you, we're still figuring out our pricing a little bit. We know what we charge, but we're constantly going back and seeing, okay, are we charging enough? How does that measure against the cost for us, like cost of sale or cost of acquisition? It's called CAC. Could we be charging more, right? How should we model this differently for different size companies or different types of companies? There's all these considerations that go into it. What I'm going to say to you is just pick a number in the beginning. Okay. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be anywhere near perfect, but pick a number and start to go with it. And this goes in line with the startup mentality, the founder mentality, which is not to get mired down in little details like this. And it doesn't, it's not a little detail. Revenue is a big thing in your company, but you're just going to have to make decisions quickly at some points, right? You're not going to be able to think about the revenue stream thing for a year before you come out with it and do something. You might have some people that want to pay for it in the next like 6 months, and you can build a product in 6 months. You're just going to have to charge them something. So make a choice. You can always go back and change later on. You're going to have legacy customers that are paying the old pricing. It's going to happen, but just make a decision here and start to go with it, right? There are some pretty good financial models or projection models. Alina, I'm not sure if you guys have a session on that. If you do, great.
We do, yes.
Okay, so someone will go over that with you then, someone who's not me, because I'm not the best at finance. But I would get one of those and start to project out. And again, you're taking guesses here in the beginning, but just take that guess. Seven is cost structure. So what is it going to cost you to make a sale? What is it going to cost you to operate this business, right? Again, you're taking some guesses here. You want to take into account things like salary eventually, right? Even though you might not be paying yourself a salary today, you want that to go into the cost calculation because you're like it's easier to do it now than it is to go back and adjust it later on. Key metrics, number eight. So key activities that you measure. What does it mean to be successful, right? So you take those solutions, like the top three features, and you say, what is a good number for me? So for us, it's like we're helping some companies hit retention rates for employees 12% above the national average right now. Right. So that would be a key metric that I'm trying to measure, right? How much can I improve retention rates? How how far can I extend someone's recruitment reach by offering the shuttle service now, right? Or how successful can I be in recruiting? What population can I help them reach, basically, right? Different ways to think about what metrics you want to be measuring. And this is a good practice too, because when you're doing reporting to investors, eventually, if any of you take them on at some point, they're going to want to understand like what are the important metrics that you're tracking from your activities, right? What do they mean? What are the stats around them? And then channels is the last thing. And I think one of the more important pieces to this as well, how do you get to your customers, right? So Tony was kind of talking about this before with his question. How do we access if it's not something where we can go to a mall and survey people, right? How do we access them? There are tools like Apollo, like Hunter, that are doing scraping for you. You want to use your CRM tools like HubSpot, and I'll get into that in a second. Um, so part of it is doing kind of the cold reach outs there. The other part of it is, again, going back to your network. And this is a common theme. You're going to need your network to build a startup. So go to the Y Space folks if you're with them. Go to other founders that you know, right? Go to people in the space that you might know, right? A lot of you might be solving a problem that you've seen at work. So go back to people in the industry that you know and ask for help, ask for introductions. Don't be shy about this at all. Okay, so my to round it off with this is don't be shy about sharing what you're building. If somebody can do it better than you, they're going to do it better than you, regardless of how far in advance you start, right? You have to believe that you're the best person to do this, that you're going to build the best solution. So don't be shy about sharing in the beginning. Actually, I'll stop there for questions again, because I think this was a lot, like this was a big piece. Let me look at the chat, sorry.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions in the chat. Somebody said that if when you're taking questions, let me know, but I think they've deleted it.
Yeah, that was me.
Yes.
It kind of answered. My question was, when you were doing the survey, I'm assuming your customer is the business that's hiring you. So were you serving like their customer essentially, and then when you were trying to land your clients, you would bring that, like, okay, these are the results to the businesses. If you understand my question. So you're paying customer for the software you're talking about.
Community, yeah.
Yeah, that's the customer. The paying customer isn't
Mhm.
the riders, right? It's the businesses
Oh,
that.
correct, yeah.
But when you did the survey, you weren't serving the businesses, right? You were serving the riders, or were you serving the businesses?
We did both.
You did
So we
both. Okay,
started with the
gotcha.
riders to understand if they even had a problem we're solving, and then we had to understand what the business implication of that problem was. So we picked, like I say this every day, we picked a problem that we shouldn't have picked for our first startup that we founded together. It's a really difficult problem to solve. It took us like 5 years to crack into the industry. You want to solve something where there's like one target to talk to. You don't want to go
Gotcha.
B to B to C right away.
Gotcha. Okay, that was my question. I just wanted to understand that. Thank you.
No worries. I see someone. So the problem is the grants are given with a business plan. Not all grants are given with a business plan. There are a ton out there, especially from like federal, like FedDev funding, that they're just kind of asking you some questions to fill in a box. That's why I said take diligent notes when you're doing the lean canvas. It's not a full business plan, right? So there's going to just be some random questions that you get asked that you'll be able to answer if you do this. It's still easier and it's still more time efficient than writing a 40-page business plan at this point. There are some like OCI, Ontario Centers of Innovation. I know that for some of their programs, they ask for a full business plan. And again, it's up to you at that point to decide whether or not it's worth your time to write the full business plan. But I can guarantee you, Lily, that there are grants out there that don't require a full business plan to be written. Sorry, just like
Eric,
questions.
there's a question by Ainsley. The market that I want to venture in is one that requires a certain level of approach, especially with the crisis of overdose and mental health, which means that they'll have to do a tailored survey. How do you approach that? This venture is catered to a demographic that is very limited and yet has become a visual crisis.
Sorry, and is it Ainsley? Okay. Ainsley, can you clarify for me, is it because
Yeah.
of the like the cultural sensitivity around it, or
So basically, I worked in Toronto for 17 years in homelessness. I worked at the Dawn, the West, and the East. I moved back to my hometown. We have a very serious problem with overdoses, with suicides, with mental health. Now, my business proposal is forensic abatement. But because I have a background in social work and as a First Nations female, I want to generate a business because if anybody knows anything about late wellness checks, suicides, overdoses, it's the family's tasked with the clean. The police will come, the coroner will come. However, it's the family that's tasked with the the cleanup of the situation that happens.
Yeah.
So mine is something like a compassionate cleaning service. And I know Toronto because I lived there for 17 years, and they have companies that do this, but there is
Yep.
absolutely no business in the, I guess I want to say from the 613 to the entire 613 area that has kind of tapped into this. And we had a situation in Kingston not too long ago where a person had passed away in a motel, but he hadn't been checked on for 2 weeks. It was tasked, like the staff of the hotel were delegated with the cleanup. Now, that's a very distinct service, and it's one that companies, like as a social worker by heart, it's one that companies can I don't even know how to put it into context, but what I want to do is forensic abatement. So clandestine drug lab cleanups, late wellness checks, but you can't just go out and do surveys for them. I know when someone passes away, regardless of the situation, the coroner will come pick up, but nobody is able to give a direction for the families to basically abate the remnants of that situation. And you can't go to a mall to do a survey on it. So I'm just wondering how I would be able to incorporate that, because I know I have the ability, once again, as a First Nations individual and a female, to apply for grants, but to do like a needs assessment for it. I'm just trying to figure out who I would approach in that capacity for it.
So there's like the safe way to do it is always to go through the community. Whatever community-based organizations there are that can help you access people. If there are like town hall meetings and things as well, like those style meetings, or like that's kind of the safest way to do it, because at least you get to kind of take a step back from it, and you're almost using your own local
So
government as like a shield, right?
I definitely wouldn't be going to the general public because we have a lot of NIMBYs, and I'm sure living in Toronto, you know what a NIMBY is.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like what I approach, the hospitals, funeral homes, integrated care hubs, shelters,
Yeah.
I approach that.
Yeah, so you want to tie yourself to those organizations. You're right. Yeah. Because that also, it gives you the access to the people that you want in a more of a discreet way.
Okay.
And then also from a business perspective, and not to be crude, but it is a business.
Yeah.
It gives you a bit of stability, right? Like, that you're going to have customers coming through because you have these referrals and you have these partnerships created. So it gives you stability from the business perspective. It gives you a little bit of stability from the approach that you're taking. And just kind of like stick to organizations like that, right? Stick to these other community-based organizations, if there are any that are working with them as well. And just kind of like use them right now to launch yourself. It'll also bode well for your grants as well, right? So showing that you're working with like credible organizations always helps with your grant applications.
I've researched there are actual government programs that will certify people in environmental cleaning and abatement. And would you be able to, like, maybe on a side note, direct me? Like, I've researched them myself, but anything that you might be able to push towards me to maybe further that aspect?
Yeah, I'll at the end of this, I'll kind of touch a bit more on these different grants and programs and things for everybody else, and then I'll leave my LinkedIn as well, so anyone can connect, and you can ask questions on the side if you'd like.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So I think, Octavia, that probably answers your question as well. I'll get to the grants. Hassan, so do you find people start new ventures more based on past experience or based on what they are observing whilst traveling, or life experience? As a general question, do you find B2C tougher in terms of customer acquisition, or lower margin versus B2B? There's really not a stat to show where people get ideas. I think it's just anywhere. I got a little bit of I got pieces of my idea from different things that I did, right? Like if I really go back to it, like, yeah, I was just kind of observing my day to day, and that's what happened. But if I really go back to it, when I lived in Trinidad, people stood on the highway and like they would hold out like a $20 bill, and someone would just stop and pick them up, and if they're going that way, they take them. And I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like when I'm walking to the bus stop and it's like negative 20 degrees, why can't I just wave like a $20 bill and someone comes and picks me up? Maybe not 20, but someone just comes and picks me up, right? And so the idea kind of comes from different parts of your life, and I think it's up to you to kind of piece it together yourself and see what works. B2C, B2B, neither is tougher than the other one. It really just depends on you. I find B2C to be more difficult for me personally. The volume is what kills me. B2B, I like to put together like a really nice, robust solution for a company and kind of show them, at a lower volume than it would be B2C. But I think it has a higher impact on individual customers that you have. Right. So it's more about you, what your style is, right? Are you like a high volume person, or are you someone that really likes to put together a nice methodical plan and a proposal for them? How
Yeah,
do you
I appreciate
value?
that, Eric. Yeah, sorry. I just had a follow-up question, and I wanted to ask you before I forget.
Mhm.
That's honestly really great advice. In terms of like B2B versus B2C, do you find like B2B could be like higher margin in the long term, and how would you go about like maybe getting feedback and surveying them before you have maybe a minimum viable product? Like I think that would be so key, but I mean it's kind of difficult for me to kind of envision how to go about them because they're less approachable and also more hesitant maybe sometimes to
Yeah.
share information. Yeah.
So we actually started peer to peer and like B2C. I'll share this with all of you. My first idea for Hop In was a hitchhiking app, and we built it without even surveying, and we got like all bad feedback. We didn't get a single piece of good feedback from it. People hated it. It was unsafe. They were like, "How are you processing payments? You can't just give each other like a Ziploc of cash every day." It was bad. And so we started that way. We moved to B2B because again, it was easier for me. We saw a bit more of an opportunity there. But in terms of like surveying going back, like as a broad statement, you can always go back and survey anybody, right? Some people are not going to be so keen on it, but that's going to happen. Everything about this is a volume game at the end of the day, and you're just going to have to keep going back and going to new people, finding new people. There's enough people on this planet that we can find new people if we need to. But the surveying and everything, the getting through B2B and B2C, it's yeah, I would say like it's use some of the tools that I've mentioned as well because they're going to help you kind of hack into who you can talk to and target your searches a little bit more for who to talk to because that will ultimately give you better success rates for even coming back and talking to them later on, right? Margins, again, if you go to unit economics, I guess higher margins usually lie with B2B SaaS companies, so software as a service, like the subscriptions. Um, it's hard to get there for some companies. Like we've been getting there for 5, 6 years now. We're just kind of starting to really break through with so higher margins, yes, if you look at it at face value, but at the same time, you might spend 6 months on a B2B deal, right? You might spend a week on a B2C deal. So in that 6 month span, you could probably get more sales in B2C, right? So again, it really just depends on you and how you're willing to work on this, and also where the problem lies, right? Are you willing to wait 6 months to get that bigger check, or do you want to get a check every day that's smaller and build up? And go to Ross next. So how do you value a company in early startup stages? How do you raise capital? Um, Valuation in the early days is really arbitrary as well. A lot of early stuff in a startup is going to be arbitrary. I just kind of went off of the notion that, if you're going to invest in me early on, if you don't value me at least $2 million, what are we doing here? And I had a lot of people turn me away for that, but then I had a few that said yes and ended up giving me a 2 million valuation cap. There's a difference between a cap and a valuation. I won't get too much into raising right now because I do suspect, Alina, that you have a raising workshop as well.
We, not as part of Founder Fundamentals, but we do
Okay.
so much work around raising as well. So we'll
Okay.
share that with the group.
Okay. I'm sorry, Ross. I won't get into it too much because raising is actually an entire presentation that I give as well. Again, connect with me on LinkedIn if anybody wants to go through this. But this is all, everything I'm going through today is going to be the stuff that gets you to your raise eventually. Regarding unfair advantage, I came up with a very good one, but unfortunately competitors are also making up claims/statements that make my unfair advantage not as unique as I thought it was. What should I do? For context, I'm in the retail industry, sustainable fashion, and the issue is with companies greenwashing. So number one, if they're just making claims that aren't actually true, you can refute that pretty easily, right? Find some research, find some studies and things, and also just make that claim yourself. If you're sure that they're making the claim without backing it up, then just call them out on it. That's the benefit of being a startup founder. If they're actually doing it though, and they're actually eating into your unfair advantage, you know, the first thing to do is think about, are there other advantages that you could have, right? Or is there, so you can either kind of walk away from it and find a new advantage, or you can get even more granular and you can figure out within that unfair advantage, do I have another unfair advantage, right? Is there a certain process or are there certain chemicals that they're using um, that that I can do better with, right? Or I can improve on. So you either walk away from it and find a new one, or you get granular and you find a problem within the advantage that you can solve. Right. And that in and of itself is a startup idea. If I'm a tech startup and my customers are companies, how do I survey? So again, I put some of the links in there. You have to kind of scrape and find contacts, find some of the companies that you want to talk to. And this is where I would stress the fact that I make it seem like I'm just doing a research project for school or something, because especially companies are not going to answer you if you're trying to sell them something and you don't even have a product or service yet. You want to just make it seem like it's a research project. Um, Yeah, I'll send over after the presentation, Alina, I'll send it through you, but I'll send a list of some of the grants that are available.
That'll be great. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I'm just trying to see if there are more questions. What's the best way to go about researching to create an unfair advantage? Learning your competitors inside and out is the best way to go about researching or creating an unfair advantage, right? Like we looked at, so we thought we were competing with Uber in the beginning. So we researched every single thing about Uber that we could find. Turns out they're not a competitor anymore. We actually use them. But we learned every single thing we could about Uber and we said, okay, this is where we can pick you apart. So one thing we discovered with them, for example, was that Uber can't actually coordinate mass volume transportation, right? They're a taxi service at the end of the day, right? They do single rides. Their pool algorithm is not the best. Um, it doesn't it doesn't optimize for pricing. It doesn't optimize for logistics, time spent on the road, distance traveled, emissions, right? Greenhouse gas emissions. That's where we figured out that we could win Octavia. So research your competitors first. That's the best place to start when you're looking for your advantage, right? The other thing is like Reddit is also your best friend for this, right? Go on Reddit and figure out what issues people have with your competitors. And that's going to tell you what you need to know. And even talk to them. Create an anonymous Reddit account, build it up a bit, and then go talk to people. We actually are getting leads off of Reddit right now. Okay. So the other part of this, so I mentioned again, how do you kind of get through all of these things? The first thing is the lean canvas. Second, the administrative task for starting a startup. So just some examples of what we're thinking about, right? Like legal, we're thinking about incorporation of a business eventually. We're thinking about, you know, do we have founders, co-founders? Do we need insurance, right? A lot of these things can be answered with owner, which used to be founded. Again, a startup that I met when I actually worked the front desk of the incubator where NAFIS was before, from MySpace. That's how we met. Owner was one of the startups in the incubator. I love what they're doing. They're acquired by RBC Ventures, I think, a few years ago. But it gives you all of your like foundation documents and things, incorporation and all that. It'll handle it all. Um, Finance and accounting, right? You're looking at your projections, you're looking at taxes and credits. You might just go through a traditional accountant for this. You probably still have to at some point in order to actually file the taxes. Um, you know, the projections, I think Alina said that you're going to have somebody come in and kind of teach you how to do that. Start with Excel for a lot of this stuff, right? But you can move to something like QuickBooks pretty easily. QuickBooks was where we started. It was cheap enough and you know, you could do most of the work yourselves. Um, but always look for the free solution first. Sales and marketing, you need to answer the 5 W's and how, right? You need to know about your customers. You need to know how you're going to sell. You need to be able to keep a repo of your lead lists and things. HubSpot is going to be your best friend for this in the beginning, only because I think if you go through the incubator still, a lot of them have a deal where you pay like 10% of the fee for the first year and then 50% the second year. Right. So like it's almost nothing. But there is a free version for HubSpot as well.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind, right? You want to use some of these tools. Notion is honestly my favorite tool because you can do literally anything with it. If any of you have ever used it before, we create like landing pages on Notion. We create project timelines and like Gantt charts and things like that. You can do anything on Notion. Which brings me to the point, how do you afford all this? So you might be saving money if you're working a job and you're kind of just starting this on the side. If you have excess capital, then you can save your money. Keep in mind, again, many of the software solutions that I told you about are free. There's a freemium version of them that you should start with. So grants, Ontario Centers of Innovation, again, a lot of what they're doing is going to require a full business plan. There's some of them don't, some of them do. You just have to kind of do some digging with them. And there are representatives that you can actually get in contact with that'll walk you through the grants. Government of Canada has FedDev funds. So things like CanExport. CanExport is one that helps cover, I think, half the cost of the $50,000 to help you expand into like a foreign market or something, right? There's IRAP for research, right? There is the Shred tax credit, SR and ED, that's what it is. A lot of these grants, tax credits, and things don't necessarily require a full business plan for you to apply for them, right? There are other ministries as well, and I want to just touch on this quickly. We had a project with one of the counties in Eastern Ontario, and we initially got funding for the project from the Ministry of Labor. So it wasn't even the Ministry of Transportation, it was the Ministry of Labor that gave it to us because we were expanding the workforce reach for the county. So I would look at the different ministries under the provincial designation, under the federal designation, and I would just see, do they have other grants or programs that they're offering funding for? Right. So I think Ainsley touched on it, and she knows that there's tons of grants for her out there in particular. But I would look at your specific industry, and then I would look at the ones that you're kind of adjacent to, that you're touching on, and look at grants for that. Because transportation wouldn't give us a dime, but labor gave us like 25 grand to start our first project out there. Contact your incubators. It is the best thing you can do to find grants and find funding. I can give you lists of things that I do, but even I don't know about all the funding. I actually still go to Alina and Mavis and ask them what funding is available. And I kind of check the Y-Space Slack channel every day to see if they've posted new grants that are coming out. Right. So you can do your own monitoring of this, but really at the end of the day, like incubators, that is one of their functions, is to help you with these programs and with these grant applications. Right. In the early days, pitch competitions are your best friend. I went out there and won like 5 pitch competitions early on, and that funded the first year of our startup. The first one I won was actually the city of Vaughan, I think. It was one of their small business ones. It was like, I think I won like 2 grand off of it. But guess what? We incorporated off of that and we got our shareholder agreement done. And then we had a little bit of extra money to go out and survey and do some other cool stuff. And I just kept kind of doing that. And I would just go all over the place, participating in pitch competitions. Even if you don't win, you're getting really great exposure. So look for pitch competitions. Most of them I think are going to be at like the municipal or like regional level. I don't think there's a lot of provincial pitch competitions that come out. So again, contact your incubator, contact your city, right? The city of Markham has a lot of stuff going on. The city of Vaughan has a lot going on. Toronto as well, but Toronto's a bit crowded because everyone seems to think that they have to go into Toronto to do startup oriented activities. One of the reasons why we founded our company in Markham is because it gives you the same access as the city of Toronto, as the incubators down there, but it also gives you access to like the rural areas. It gives you access. They have a huge global reach as well, right? I think we were invited to a trade mission in Vietnam next year. There's like a huge reach with some of these cities that are just outside of like the Torontos or the Vancouvers or the Montreals of the world, right? And they offer so much to you. So I would look at cities like Markham to start your companies as well, right? Get access to all the benefits that they have and the benefits that they have over some of the large cities too. Do you have to be part of the city to participate in the pitch contest? No, you don't have to be part of the city to participate in the pitch contests. We were never really part of the city of Vaughan. We were incorporated and had our head office in Markham. We pretty much always have, but like they don't really care too much. Sometimes they'll have a restriction on it, but it's very, very rare that they would because they're limiting themselves too much as well, right? Oh. And then we come back to this again. And I just want to stress this, and this is why this slide is back. Validate again. You never, ever, ever stop validating your startup. We are funded. We've raised millions of dollars. We have staff, like full-time staff on payroll, and we are surveying and validating every single chance that we get, right? So you've gone through and you've built your business now. You're incorporated, you're working on this thing now. You have co-founders. It's great, but go back and validate again. Just like make sure that you are sure about what you know. And you really don't know that until you've surveyed again. Right. So survey, start building your product at this point, right? Maybe not make adjustments to your survey, but start building your product or service now because you can, and then survey again. Every time you finish a sprint or every time you've hit a milestone, however small it is, try and survey again, right? The worst thing would be, and I think Mark Zuckerberg said this, the worst thing is to wait for the perfect product, right? You don't want to finish 10 sprints where your product is done and you have a minimum viable product. Then you go and you figure out that 5 of those 10 activities that you did, the projects are just nothing. Nobody wants them, right? Just validate every step of the way if you can. Take the time that you need to do that the first time, like in the beginning of each process, rather than have to wait until the end of everything and then realize that what you did is not actually going to yield, right? A lot of startups get caught in that trap. At some point, they feel like they're comfortable enough and they stop validating and they stop surveying. Surveying is just customer success at the end of the day, right? That's what it becomes. It becomes your customer success department. It becomes your account executives that are going back and making sure that your customers are still happy with the solution you're offering, right? Making sure that you understand what more they want from you, what more you can build for them and sell to them. So please, 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 I need to stress this. Don't ever stop validating. Don't ever stop surveying and asking what your customers and what your community thinks about what you're doing. Oh. Now, a few more things to consider. These didn't really fit into the presentation, but I think they are a few important things that we should note. And yes, I will share the slides, I promise, because there's a lot of writing on this one in particular. The reason why we capture emails is not just so we can give a raffle prize, but you want to hold a lead list of early adopters, right? You need to find a way to contact them. So you keep a list of all the people who responded positively to your surveys. You keep that in a separate Excel or a separate file or whatever it is. Some of them will end up being your beta testers and your earliest customers even, right? You want to keep them in the loop. You want to keep going back to these people and asking, right? You want to make them feel special. You might even want to get 10 like what we did in the beginning was we got the 10 most active and engaged participants in our surveys, and we threw a pizza party for them. And we had them come in and we just talked about the problem, right? That was the common thing between all of us. And we fed them all pizza and we talked about this for a couple of hours. We hung out and then we sent them home, right? But some of those people still come back and answer our surveys. 3 of those 10 ended up becoming customers. So keep that list, nurture those leads, right? Email lead nurturing, that's something that I think you'll probably get into later on as well. I just want to touch on it briefly so we kind of understand. You want to be writing content and blogs and things. You want to be active on social media because you want to start building your presence today so that when you're launching your product and service, then you already have a brand and a presence, right? So you need to start really, really early with your marketing and your branding. Write your monthly blogs or your biweekly blogs, whatever it is. Post on social media at least 2 or 3 times a week, right? You want to chop up all this content from your blogs and from your content. You want to put it in your social media posts. You want to set up your lead nurturing funnels, right? For that, you're going to use HubSpot or MailChimp. Active Campaign's one that I used to use. I don't know how good it is anymore. But basically get an email list going is what I'm saying. Right. So all these people that you've kept in your whose emails you've kept, you have to be able to keep them engaged between the surveys, right? Or keep them engaged between today when you surveyed them and a year from now when your product is finally ready to launch, right? You can't just leave them alone for a year and then come back and say, hey, remember a full year ago when I last talked to you and we talked about this, they're not going to remember you. They're not going to answer you. So you want to be sending out like a monthly or quarterly email or something with content that's relevant to them, right? And that's why you're blogging, and that's why you're kind of creating this funnel. Um, the reason why I listed HubSpot and Mailchimp is because those are probably really good places to store them, especially HubSpot if you're going to use it for sales and marketing. So store them there, send them regular emails, keep them up to date with what's going on with you, send them relevant content, and then give them updates about where you are in your process, right? You want to get them excited that you're launching a product. So if we're 1 year away, you're going to send them an email and say coming soon. Next quarter, you're going to send another email saying we're 9 months out from a product launch, 6 months out, 3 months out, we're a week out. Get ready, right? Get them excited about this. And then if the list is engaged, I just want to stress again, keep going back to them, right? If they're willing to answer you and they really have such a big problem that you're solving that they want to be talking to you like this, don't let them go, right? These are your number one people right now that you want to keep happy. Questions here? No? Okay. This is one that I really, really like, and I want us to consider and always keep in the back of our minds. The
Sorry,
three
I got
H.
a question.
Oh yeah, sure.
Just, I know you might have to go back a slide. Just how long do you think this? I know you mentioned B2B might be like 6 months, 4 to 6 months potentially for landing a really big kind of paycheck with one awesome client who really likes product or service. But then with the customers, it might be really way shorter. Do you think this sales funnel would be varying for B2B versus B2C? And is it could it be shortened somehow? Like for example, if I wanted to make a sale quicker, should I focus more of my time on like developing a better product or analyzing my competitors better?
You kind of have to do everything. You're finding time that doesn't exist in a day, basically. And I hate to say that, and I say these things very honestly, right? Because I want everyone to know that although it's really cool and exciting to have a startup, it is also a lot of work, right? This is not like this is a picture I took because to be honest, most of where you're going to start to work from is like prospecting and like marketing qualified leads. Like you're going to go from like red down almost. The first two, the top two here are kind of more for the beginning stages, especially awareness. Um, so awareness is like where we are right now, right? We're trying to build an early list of adopters and things. That's going to be scrapped later on, and you're just going to have an actual funnel. Lead capture and prospecting are just going to become one piece together. And they can actually be one piece now. Actually looking at this now, I don't know why it's separated. And then the rest of your funnel is really where you get into the meat of it, right? Marketing qualified leads, sale qualified leads, opportunities, and customers, right? So even opportunities, leads, it might just be eliminated, right? For us, we built so even within B2B and B2C, you're going to see a lot of differences between company to company, right? The titles or the labels for each piece of the funnel going to be different. Number of steps are going to be different. Um, I think we have like 4 steps in our funnel, and that's it. But this is kind of like to show you everything that could be in your funnel potentially. Does that make sense? Was that your question?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of tough to imagine in my mind what a sales process might look like. I always think of it in a very simplified manner. It's just like, maybe posting a blog or something or an ad on LinkedIn for some of my B2B clients potentially. Try to create awareness, solve some of their problems beforehand, and then just email them or message them. I always thought of it like that, but potentially maybe like making it further, like drilling down and making a lot more steps out of it might help. But I think only time will tell like how it's going to actually work for me and my specific business. It's tough to kind of answer right now.
Yeah, and what I want to say is like think of it all as business development, right? So under business development, you have partnerships, marketing, sales, let's say. Sales is what we're focusing on right now here, you can see. So sales is like basically the process of us sending a series of cold emails, making cold calls, booking meetings. Let's say we hit like a 5% meeting booked rate or something, right? Pushing them through the funnel and getting them to a close eventually, right? That's great. That's sales. Partnerships and marketing are where we discover the verticals to get those, to be able to send those cold emails and make those cold calls. So your marketing team is going to figure out like search engine optimization, SEO, right? What is the language that we need to use to get to our people? Where are they so that we know how to reach them? Are they on the internet? Are they at conferences or events? Are they walking on the street getting a bagel at 8 in the morning? Right. Your marketing is going to figure out like who you're hitting, how to hit them, and when to hit them and where, right? Your partnerships are then going to take that knowledge and they're going to say, okay, great. We're going to open up verticals, right? So one vertical is going to be going to conferences and events. One vertical is going to be hitting Reddit, right? Another one is going to be LinkedIn, um, whatever else. Those are your verticals. And then they're going to be able to get all these partners uh, to refer customers to you or leads to you. Your sales team is going to kind of get involved there. So partnerships for me, and this is for my company, is kind of sandwiched between marketing and sales, right? So marketing and sales kind of encroach on that territory a little bit, and then they kind of pull what they need to from there and push back where they need to. They're going to line up all the people, right? They're gonna validate your markets so that sales knows that they're going into a hot market. The worst thing you could do for a sales team is to send them into a market that hasn't been validated, right? They're just going to make a bunch of reach outs and they have no idea if they're going to be successful or not. So I think if you divide it a little bit that way, when you look at marketing as the top of the funnel, where you really have to do all the prospecting to figure out everything about your persona, right down to the language that they use on the internet, and then kind of work it down towards sales, I think that gives you a better structure. And you're right, you're going to have to do a lot in the beginning, right? There's going to be steps that are going to be eliminated later on, but you need to have them today in order to figure out what needs to be cut down later on.
You're right. I think I'm still trying to figure out what that vertical is where I can add kind of the best value. And I'm not trying to like go off script here, but for me it's very very difficult because the type of service I'm offering is strategic planning and business modeling, but I'm trying to develop a platform that can so it can do all of that stuff on the cloud at a reasonable price initially. But it's so difficult because I talk to a lot of people at conferences and obviously incubators and accelerators. But I think for me, it's just trying to figure out who has that extra little bit of budget, is willing to spend. And it's difficult for the pricing.
That's where I want to caution you. And I mentioned this before. You don't want to get into the game where you're looking for extra budget. You want to get into the game where they have to budget for it because it's such a problem, right? If you're looking for extra budget, it's a bit of a losing game. You're not, it's a nice to have, not a necessity.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Right. So I think what you need to do is kind of go take a step back again and look at your problem again. Maybe go through another validation cycle before we jump right into this. And then through marketing again, you're going to discover once you have your problem, you go through the marketing exercise of discovering, who are these people, where can you find them, when can you find them, how, right? All the questions that you need to ask yourself. But for everybody here, if you find yourself asking if they have extra room in the budget, go back and validate the problem again because it's not a problem. It's just annoying. Does that make sense? Cool. So when we go to networking events, does it matter if we are dressed in business wear or casuals? Does that impact? Depends on the event. Um, you go to like a tech TO event, no one's really going to care if you're wearing a suit or a t-shirt. If you go to like what did we go to? We went to like the food and beverage summit for the Brampton Board of Trade last week. You should wear a suit to that one probably. So it just depends on the like who's hosting the event and what it is. Um, part of why I like startups and why I got out of the government was because I don't have to wear a suit and tie every single day anymore. I'm in a t-shirt right now. But I do dress up for the events that are important. So just kind of be aware. It's a bit of a like a situational awareness thing. Okay, so the 3H theory is my favorite theory in startups. I think it's just awesome, and I think it makes a lot of sense. So it's the hipster, the hustler, and the hacker. I'm not sure if anyone's actually heard of this before. So this is what we call the minimum viable team. And this is what a bunch of venture capital firms got together and thought about and said, okay, these are the three archetypes that we need as founders in a company to be able to create a unicorn. And for those of you that don't know what a unicorn is, it's a company that's valued at $1 billion or more. Right. So these are the three archetypes of co-founders that we need to develop a unicorn. So you have your hipster that does marketing and product management, your hackers that do development and design, your hustlers can do public relations, recruiting, product development, and sales. Your hipsters can also do public relations and recruiting a little bit. If you see how it kind of like it goes back and forth a little bit here, you need this. Like you absolutely need at least two of the three to found your company. You might be two of the three on your own. And so go ahead and be a solo founder and do it. I actually never advise being a solo founder if you can help it. It is an extremely lonely journey. You don't know until you're a year into this thing or even 6 months into this thing how much you actually need at least one more person there that just kind of keeps you sane and keeps you going. Right. My co-founder wasn't full-time, I think, until a year and a half into the company. I was full-time the whole time. That year and a half, even though he was coming every day after work and on weekends, it was still very, very lonely. I was the only one that could go out to conferences and meetings and things during the day. He would come and grind with me and do work in the night, but like it just wasn't the same, right? Whereas now I can, or when it was just like four of us in the company at the early days, when we hired our first couple employees, I could at least turn to him and just talk to him, right? I could call him in the day if I needed to. We went to meetings together. We did our first sales meetings together because we were way too nervous to go alone. Having a co-founder is just great for so many different reasons, right? So find your teammates, go to those events, go to TechTO events, go to different conferences and things, right? I think I'm presenting at the Future Festival. I have a booth at the Future Festival on October 1st. Events like that are awesome, right? Go where the startup people are or the people that want to be in startups are, and find your co-founders, right? I was really lucky because my co-founder was my best friend. That also is something that people don't advise you to do, and I'm not entirely sure why, because we have a perfectly candid relationship already. So being co-founders just kind of made sense for us. If you have a relationship where you have to dance around each other, maybe that's where it makes sense. You shouldn't be co-founders, but you know, find your co-founder wherever they are. There's so many different places you can find them. I think someone unmuted themselves.
Yeah, that was
No?
me for a second. I was just gonna share, like a founder is essentially your spouse. Like, because I had a partner before, it works great if you align well.
Yeah.
But if your thinking is very different, then it's like a nightmare.
Yep. Exactly. And it can go very wrong very quickly as well. In my first startup, it went very, very wrong, very, very, very quickly. And I got out of there, I think from the time I decided to get out to the time I was actually out was like 2 weeks. And I was like the chief of staff, like I was the right-hand person to the CEO and the solo founder of that company. Right. I was employee number 2 in that company. Which actually brings me to my last point. Set the tone early with your co-founders. Right? If things go wrong, you don't want to be spending your time in a legal battle. You don't want to be spending your time, arguing night and day with them about, oh, well, I have these shares and you have those, right? I own the company, so give it to me. I'm going to take it and run with it. No, right? Set the tone really early. Figure out your ownership model. It's called a shareholders agreement. Owner can help you with it, or a lawyer. A lot of law firms, especially in Toronto, have like a startup package that they do for like $5,000, I think. Um, Again, Space can connect you to these people. So go to your incubators, but get an ownership model in place early on, right? Don't leave it to later to argue with your co-founders. The other thing is when you figure out this ownership model, also figure out your role division, right? Everybody should own a department in the company. Your department might just be you. You also might be like 3 departments on your own. Doesn't matter. You own your departments, right? Eventually you're going to have teams under you and that they're going to be full departments, but you need to set that tone really, really early on and make sure that everyone knows what they own. But at the end of the day, there can only be one CEO. My co-founder and I flipped a coin and I lost the coin toss, so I had to be CEO. Like honest to goodness, that's what we did. And neither of us wanted to be CEO of the company. I lost, so I am in charge right now. But you don't understand until later on, especially how important it is for one person to be in charge of your company. Okay, so make sure that you set these boundaries very, very, very early on in your company. Um, Lastly, I just want to say the other thing that I had to learn the hard way is that you have to celebrate the small wins, right? It's going to be a very long and winding uphill battle to get to your startup, to even get a startup going, right? Let alone get an exit or raise funds or anything like that. Just getting to the point where you can have a startup is extremely difficult. So remember to celebrate the small wins, right? Today I got 10 surveys. Yesterday I had one. That's a win, right? Just take a second every day to understand that what you're doing is extremely difficult and that you're going to have up and down days. Okay, so celebrate the small wins, give yourselves a pat on the back. Um, the other thing here is lean on your community, right? They're going to be the ones that support you through all of this, your incubator, your fellow founders, right? Friends and family are there for you, and I'll never discount the amount of support that you get from them, but there is also merit to people that are going through the same thing as you at the same time, right? Founders understand founders, like the difficulties of being a founder, and you can help each other. Even for something like raising capital, I had a raising buddy. It was another founder that I came up with, and we were both raising at the same time. We shared lists, we shared learnings, and every single week we met and kept each other accountable to hit our targets. Right. So lean on your community. It really does take a village to build a startup. Um, and I know we've had a lot of good discussion, but I want to open the floor now to whether or not anybody wants to share what they're doing. If there are more questions or kind of more in-depth questions as well. Like I said, I'll share a list of some of the grants. I'll go through you, Alina, for that. But at the same time, again, Alina will probably have a better understanding of the grants than I do.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
share a list. And then we also have a session on government grants and
Oh,
incentives
perfect.
in the workshop series. So I think that'll be really great to attend as well. But yeah, thank you so much, Eric. This was amazing. I feel like the entire workshop was like a gold mine of knowledge, but I particularly enjoyed your the 3H theory that you shared of the minimal viable team, and also the fact that continue to validate even when you figure it out, you have your operations in place, but never forget to validate. I love that point. Let's open it up to questions. I know we had lots in the chat earlier, so we still have we still have time, so let's put in your questions. Can you go through the 3H again?
Oh, yeah, sure. Do you want to share my screen again, actually?
If it's easy for you, otherwise maybe you can just summarize.
Sure. Okay, the 3H theory. So you have your hipster, your hacker, and your hustler. The way I describe it is like a bit different from this. So basically, your hipster is like the trendsetter in your company, right? They're the one that had the idea. They're the one that is going to have more ideas. The way I look at it, like my co-founder and I, we always said, it's like we're going through the jungle and there's no path, right? We have a machete each, and we're going through and carving our own path in the jungle. So, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm the hipster in the company. And so it's my job to constantly think of new ideas and new ways to figure out what we're doing, right? Or where we're going. So I'm the one that's kind of just chopping away and going. Your hustler and your hacker are going to be kind of behind you. And if you have a team eventually, they're going to be the ones that are kind of leading the team behind you, right? So they're one step behind you. They might not be the ones that are carving the path and the trail, but they're the ones that are building the road behind you so the rest of the team can walk on it, right? So the hacker is the one that puts their head down and they build and they grind. They're usually your technology officer or your developer, right? They're putting their heads down, they're grinding every day, they're building the product. A really good hacker though is going to know when to lift their head and actually talk to customers or talk to leads, right? Our product officer now that we have, we've gone through a few different technology officers and product officers. The one that we have now is really great because he puts his head down when he needs to, but he comes up for air when he needs to as well. And he actually goes in person to talk to like bus operators to understand if the app is working well. He goes to talk to customers to understand what issues they have, right? He gets in person with them. He gets on calls. So your hacker really is that person that's just like building and kind of building a solid base for your company. Your hustler is the person that can sell anything to anyone, right? They're the ones that are out there. They might be at the bar every night, or they might be at events every night or something, right? But they're out there talking to people, and they're going out there and they're just figuring it out, right? They're going to do whatever they need to do to make that sale. So that was my co-founder. We kind of went a little bit back and forth on that. Like we were both out a lot in the beginning to events and things. He's definitely more social than I am now. So I'm kind of happy that he goes and does these things a bit more. But those are kind of your three archetypes, right? So you have the one that's a bit of a trendsetter that's setting the direction for everyone. You have one that's kind of grinding and building the base at home. And then you have the one that's out all over the place, just figuring out whatever they need to sell, whatever they need to get the job done for you. Does that kind of answer your question?
Miriam, I hope that answered your question. Yes, perfect. Thank you. Awesome. Are there any other questions? You can just unmute and ask now, since we've started our question answer session. How do we initiate a persona in line with the startup idea on social media to validate our idea and maybe see how many people engage with it?
Oh, sorry. Let me just read the question again. Validate your idea and maybe see how many people engage. This is again kind of one of those things where you have a limited amount of information and you're just going to need to take a guess here. So I think it was Hassan that asked this like a similar question, right? Like you might need to go back and validate again with these people because you might have gotten it wrong, or you might have started B2C and you go B2B now. So you have to find a new group of people. Um, that's how you find your persona, is actually by taking a guess at it. It's not like a random guess though, it's an educated guess. So you do the research in the industry first, you figure it out, you try it. And that's why I said don't over survey, because we over surveyed the first time and we got 1,000 surveys collected for a group of personas that weren't even our customers in the end. So keep it short, keep it sweet, and be efficient with your time with it, but make some educated guesses. In terms of, sorry, somebody asked about the lean canvas as well. I mean, you could Google lean canvas template, and I think it'll give you like a bunch of them. Miro is one, like Miro is a software that I like to use anyways for like wireframing and stuff. So I would kind of just Google lean canvas template and find the one that's right for you, because there's a few different ones, like they tweak it a little bit here and there, but just find the one that you like the best. Will you be?
I just had a quick question. I know you talked about surveys, but in addition to running these surveys, are there services that sort of provide information, sort of like, oh, in this area there are these many students, or in this area there are these many, these kinds of businesses, things like that, where you can get information like that?
Yeah, definitely.
This is a terrible example, but it's I saw that on Bar Rescue.
No, it's a great question actually. The most obvious answer, of course, is like Census Canada or something. We actually built a plugin, like an API plugin into Census Canada for our apps, because we need that data to create like proposals for companies all the time. So Census Canada is a great one. Looking at some of the other studies that are conducted, you have your like Foresters and things like that. They have like samples or some free reports that are out. This is also where it's really important to go to your regional economic developers and your municipal economic developers, because a large part of their job every single year or every single quarter is to produce this exact report. York Link is the one for like York Region that does a lot of this economic development work. And I remember one year they came out with this report and it had a map of the top 40 companies in York Region. And it was literally a map with logos. And I was like, oh my goodness, this saved me like 2 days of work. So make sure that you are connecting with economic development officers. They are going to be your best friends through all this. Like anybody at the municipal level, to be honest, right? Like I think at this point we've probably abused our relationship with the city of Markham. Like they've been really, really good to us the whole time. and they continue to give us a lot of help where we need it.
I have a
Oh yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I have a quick question for you. Do you personally had like a background in software?
Nope, I still don't really know how to code. I can do a little bit of like HTML. I can do like WordPress stuff, but I still don't know how to code.
So you
That was one
relied
of our
on like,
challenges.
so were you relying on your co-founder or like outside hires?
No, my co-founder could only sell.
Okay, so it's
He
outside
was
hires.
worse than I was at coding. Yeah, you either have to convince somebody to join you and be a co-founder, right? Do this on their spare time, someone that really is into the problem you're solving, or you have to pay somebody. Um, these days it's so easy to be able to pay somebody. Like back when we were starting, even it was kind of the start of services like Fiverr or Upwork or something like that. They weren't really around yet. So to find overseas developers was difficult because they weren't credible. And then also to find local developers was difficult because, it was going to cost me 10, 15, $20,000 to build an MVP of my app. So we had to piece it together from different friends of friends that were willing to help us with different parts of the apps. But today, go on Fiverr and find someone that can do it for you, right? That's the cheapest way to do it, to be honest, if you have to pay for it. But also go to events, go to TechTO events, things like that. I say TechTO because that's where I met so many people. That's one of my favorite ones in Toronto. There's also, I think, the League in Vancouver has some stuff. TechTO also, I think, spans across Vancouver now. Um, he's actually one of our investors, Norman. But go to events first, try to find a co-founder that's technical, someone that really resonates with your problem. And then if you can't do that, then I would go to Fiverr or Upwork and find someone that will build it for you for relatively cheap.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Tim, for us again, it was friends of friends that were kind of helping out and doing it for us for pretty much like next to nothing compared to what they were actually earning. So that was kind of like the hustler and my co-founder and I figuring out how to get people to do this for a lower cost. We would like take them out for dinner or take them to the bar for a night or something, and then they would agree to build it for us. Literally anything you can do to have them build it for you. How about using Shopify? Lily, can you expand on that a bit? What do you mean? How about using Shopify? Are you building something e-commerce? Is that why?
Yeah, but you see, can you see me?
Yep.
Like Shopify, very often I receive junk mail from Shopify.
Yeah.
They say they can build your website or they can do your app if you use their platform. But I don't know the agreement of
Oh,
using their platform. Like I didn't
yeah.
go that far. I just read their junk mail like and then toss that out. But why would Shopify come and help us? I kind of am a little bit suspicious.
It's not too suspicious. Like you can do it there. They just want you to use their platform to sell later on. There's so many different website builders too. Squarespace is one. Squarespace, Wix. These are two pretty decent tools that are not too expensive as well.
It's free.
Um,
Wix is free, right?
Wix is free, but you have like the Wix banner on your website if you're okay with that.
Oh, okay. If
Yeah,
you
that's how they
pay,
get
they
you.
don't have that.
Yeah, so there are tons of website builders out there that can help you out. Like Shopify is one that's fine. Like Shopify is a very reputable company, so it's fine. But
Are
look
they
at the other ones.
expensive?
Like they can be depending on what you want them for. I think for Wix back in 2019, we were paying like $20 a month for it. We were doing like very minimal things. Squarespace, I just built my parents a website on Squarespace for something they're doing. I think they're paying like $40 a month for it. It's not too bad. So it just depends on like what you want to
Shopify,
do
how
with it.
much would they cost? I never asked them, but
Shopify, I don't know. I haven't actually built a site with them in a while. But Shopify again, like I would go with them if you're going towards like e-commerce, because that's what they're geared towards, right? If not, I would go towards like a Wix or a Squarespace or something like that.
fintech.
Um, yeah, and what's really good about those other ones, the builders like that, is that you don't have to know how to code to build a website necessarily. Like you can code some things in and it customizes a bit more for you, but like Squarespace, for example, it's just blocks basically. Like you're just adding in like a text box here, you drag it over, picture box here, whatever else you need.
No, but for fintech,
For fintech, um,
best Shopify or these two others, Square,
well, it depends if you're going towards e-commerce or like what kind of fintech, right?
e-commerce.
Yeah,
Lily,
so then I
maybe,
would use Shopify.
sorry to jump in, Lily, maybe we can set up a quick call and I can suggest some resources for you as well.
Yes, right now, maybe in a month time, I am going on for surgery on Friday. So I'm extremely busy and I won't be able to walk for a while. So
Yeah, whenever you're comfortable and ready, we can
when
set up.
I'm back home, from
Yeah.
hospital.
Okay. Yeah, but we'll look at some of the options. Octavia asks, is it okay to just have a landing page and then switch into creating a website? I love this. Now you're thinking like a founder. I love this. I do this all the time. HubSpot, because I have like the premium paid version, I can create a ton of landing pages. So what I do is I just go create like 10 landing pages for 10 different customer segments, and I split test my marketing emails. And I just laid it to the landing page, like each individual landing page. So I made one for like healthcare hospitals. I made one for senior living facilities. I made one for like auto manufacturing, food processing, retail distribution, like UPS style companies. I've made so many landing pages, and then if it tests well, then I'm like, okay, guys, we're gonna add this to the actual website now, and we're gonna actually make it look nice and everything, right? But like I scrap together landing pages for everything, right? Like that's the best thing you could do because it takes the least amount of time. It's not that expensive, and it's just like it's great. It's very, very like startup mentality. I even send like videos to people too through that, right? Like I'll record like a really, really stupid video of myself, put it on one of the landing pages where I just like I'm asking you a bunch of questions and then leading you towards booking a meeting. And I don't know, convert sometimes. So like literally try any of that stuff to try to get people to visit you. And then you can build a full website around it later. Any other questions, or does anyone want to share any other thoughts they have while we're here?
Yes, you know what? When I have an idea with time, it evolves. What happened? Because before I have incorporated and I have had
Mhm.
people make app, website, all that over, but I haven't actually had time. But now I have retired, I have time, and I don't have to worry too much about money for bootstrapping. I have just barely enough to look after myself, so I can venture somewhere else. But the thing is, from that time to today, my ideas have changed. You see,
Mhm.
so do you think it's easy to find co-founders or investors? Because, and I feel it is right to change. That's my opinion. Because John Chen took a BlackBerry from a hardware company and made it a software company to save it. You understand what I mean? Had John Chen been hired by Nortel to to change Nortel, maybe Nortel would still be alive today. You know what I mean? I always think
Yeah.
like this. But I also have that kind of, if this doesn't work or it is outdated by now, I want it to be something else. But I don't know
Yeah.
whether people will say I'm unstable or I
As
follow the trend. What
no,
is
it's
it?
not unstable as long as it kind of follows the progression of your startup idea, right? So like um for example, the BlackBerry thing, right? Like that was the trend that they had to go towards to evolve their startup. If it seems like it's completely different idea, then yeah, they're going to look at you, the investors and everybody, and say, well, this is too all over the place. But if you can explain the story and it's like a very logical progression and it makes sense
Yeah.
that it evolves that way, then yes, it makes sense.
So I can carry on with my idea of moving in that direction.
Yeah, just make sure it's in the same direction. Make sure you can tell the story. That's it, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Are there any other questions for Eric?
Oh, I promise I'll put my LinkedIn here.
Yes, I think that'll be great.
Thank you, Eric. With what you taught us, we should be able to find your LinkedIn.
You know what? I'll make it a little bit easier for you this time, though.
All right.
Here's my LinkedIn, everybody. Feel free to add me. Even if I might not answer like right away because we're just in a very busy period right now. I will get to it eventually, and consider me part of the community now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're all caught up with questions. So a bunch of you have messaged me directly as well, asking about the recording and the presentation deck. So we will share the presentation deck along with the recording and other resources that we discussed, like grants and the Lean Canvas, a template for the Lean Canvas model, tomorrow by noon, hopefully. So if you don't hear from us by then, you can reach out to us on whitespace@yourq.ca. But hopefully we have your email addresses, and hopefully we'll be able to send out the material by tomorrow noon. Eric, thank you so much for your time, for this extremely valuable workshop. I've taken so much out of it. I'm sure this entire group has really found this resourceful as well. So thank you so much.